If you are ready to start making money right now as a self-published romance author, I'm here to help. I'm Kate, and I have helped over 2,000 authors sell more books with my social media and another 6,000 authors write their books with my self-publishing guides. And I'm gonna go through all of this information pretty fast, so hold on, because the goal right now is for you to write a book fast, so I'm gonna go through the information a little bit quickly so we can encompass a ton of information in one video. The first thing you need to do is pick the genre of your book, and not just the genre, because the genre in the case of this video is romance, but you also want to pick the subgenre. Are you writing a billionaire romance? Are you writing a sweet and non-spicy small town romance? Are you writing a romantic thriller? Are you writing a romantic suspense? There's all sorts of different romance novels that you can create, and you want to understand exactly what genre you're doing, as well as if that book is going to be spicy and have adult scenes, and how many and like the level of adult content you want to have in that book. Don't worry, it's totally fine if the answer to that is 0. You also want to write down the tropes you want to include. So is your love interest your main character's brother's best friend or her best friend's older brother? We don't know, but make sure that you write down these tropes that you want to include to make your book a little bit juicier, make it a little easier to sell. Understanding this first part is going to help you a lot with your marketing and with your cover design and with your book design itself. The next thing you want to do if you're trying to write and publish a book quickly is outline the book. Now there are two types of writers, plotters and pantsers. Pantsers means you are writing by the seat of your pants, and it can be very difficult to edit when you're writing this way because you don't super know where the story is going, so you have to do a lot heavier editing towards the end. So the outline strategy that I use to write books very quickly is this. I use a 16-point 3-act structure, starting with the beginning, then the inciting incident, second thoughts, climax of act 1, 2 obstacles, the midpoint, otherwise known as the turning point, an obstacle, the crisis, the disaster, the climax of act 2, another obstacle, the climax of act 3, another obstacle, the denouement, and the end. And sometimes I'll combine that denouement and end, but not all the time. If that was way too fast for you to go through, don't worry. I'm going to list the different points in the description, but you can also learn more about it in my self-publishing success course where I go really into detail on this outline. But if you have a pretty good idea of what this outline means, you can go ahead and get started outlining your book. Something I recommend to every single author who writes romance is to look up Theodora Taylor's 7-Figure Fiction Guide to Universal Fantasy, because this has helped me take my books from being medium to low earning to being high earning books. It took me from struggling to sell my books to writing books that sell themselves. This is not an ad, this is simply a guide that I use, and I'm including a link in the description if you need it, because this guide seriously changed my life. You also want to outline your characters and get a good idea of who your characters are, but also write things down like hairstyle, hair color, eye color, height, etc., so that you don't mess this up throughout the book and you have a page you can refer to throughout your process of writing. And then once this book is outlined and you have a basic understanding of the concept of universal fantasy, it's a good idea to go ahead and start writing. Of course, writing can be extremely difficult. It is known as a very difficult craft to do. It is something very creative. It's a very heavy art to have to do, and it's very time consuming because you're trying to write a novel that is between 40,000 and 100,000 words. If you're trying to write something longer, I would give yourself a longer time period before you get it ready for publication, because anything longer than 100,000 words is going to be extraordinarily difficult to have ready for publication within 30 days. But having a longer book doesn't necessarily mean making a ton more money. My original series that were 40,000 words per book, and I wrote 5 books within the span of a year, made me $50,000 that first year that I was self-publishing. So your books don't have to be super long to do really well. Even though the books that I write now are about 90,000 words, I didn't start at that point. So don't worry if your books are a little bit on the shorter side. Plus, my new books that are 90,000 words come out quite a bit slower because they take me a lot longer to write, and I'm getting a lot deeper into the characters and into subplots. Once you figure out the length that you want your book to be and the length you want each chapter to be, you then need to schedule out your book writing days and book writing time. Having a book ready to publish in 30 days is a massive, massive undertaking, so if you're planning on doing this, make sure that you understand that you need a lot of time to do it. If you aren't willing or able to commit to the amount of time that it would take out of your weeks, make sure that you give yourself longer before publication. So my pace in writing and my typing speed tend to vary, but overall I tend to write about 5,000 words in 2 hours of actual writing time, meaning not including my breaks. So I will generally plan on writing 5,000 words a day when I am planning on writing, or if I'm in a really big rush, then I can write 10,000 or even 12,000 words a day. My top writing day ever was around 20,000 words, and I was exhausted. That is not a sustainable pace for you to write. Before you actually start writing, it might be good to understand your actual writing speed before you plan the exact number of words you want your book to be, or you plan your release date, or you plan how many words you're going to write each day. If I really buckle down, I can get an entire novel done in the course of a week, but I don't recommend that for your first time or even your second or third time, especially if you're planning on making it longer, like 70 or 80 or 90,000 words. Writing the actual book, because we're not using AI, is going to take up the bulk of your time, so make sure to plan at least 3 weeks of writing time where you're going to sit and write for at least 2 hours a day. Also, I have been dictating a lot of my books lately because I can then sit and dictate in the car, which is where I speak the book aloud and then my voice to text writes it down. This does require a lot heavier editing, and sometimes I miss when I have paused and then repeated things even in the editing stage. So while dictation can be a lot faster or give you a lot more time to write, like when you're on your commute, it can also be very difficult to edit and to get right and to even get started because it's a very different process than typing out a book. When you do sit down to write, make sure to turn off the Wi-Fi on your computer, and if you're listening to music that's online, like I like to use Brain FM because it has like an ADHD and infinite writing mode where it really puts me into the focus because it has certain wave patterns that it uses in its music. And this isn't even like sponsored or anything. I just really like using the program for when I have to buckle down and write because it gets me into that flow state really easily. When you're finally ready to start writing, you want to do timed writing sprints. This is where you set a timer. I like to do 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and then after my third sprint, I will do 15 minutes on. This means that my timer is set for 25 minutes and I write for that full 25 minutes. I'm not allowed to check my phone. I'm not allowed to change my music. I'm not allowed to go on social media. I'm not even allowed to turn the Wi-Fi back on my computer. And for this strategy, I even bought this free write keyboard. It was super expensive, but I got it on sale for Black Friday. And it doesn't have access to the internet other than uploading the writing that you've done and emailing it to you. So I can't browse the internet when I'm using it. And I got the one with the flat keyboard because it's a lot easier for me to write on since I'm used to writing on Mac keyboards. This also means that I can't edit while I'm writing, which is super important. You don't want to start editing while you're writing the book. One thing that not a lot of people are going to teach you is that you don't have to stick to this timer method if it's not working for you, or if the timer method is necessary for you to start working, but then you get into what we call the flow state where the words are just coming out and it's super easy, and it can be really frustrating to have the timer go off telling you to stop. So at that point is when I shut off my timers and just write until I hit my goal or until I hit a wall and have to start with the timers again so that I make sure I reach my goal for that day. All right, you've written the full book. It took you forever. You're exhausted, but the book is not ready to be published yet. So we have to prep it for publication. The first thing that you're going to do is set the book aside for like a day or two. If you're in a rush, a day or two is going to be fine, but at this point I like taking a few weeks away from my books, and like I said, I publish a lot slower now because I'm a lot more experienced and because I'm not dependent on books coming out in order to make money because I have a large backlist that's constantly selling. So set the book aside for a day or two so that your brain can have a break from it, and let's come up with a title for your book. You want to make sure that this title fits your genre expectations, so look at a bunch of other titles in your genre and your subgenre to figure out what you want to title your book. And it can also be very helpful to make sure that you're not using a title that someone else has already used or has used at least within your genre. This is also really important research to do if you haven't come up with your pen name yet, because I discovered shortly after publishing my first series that there was in fact another Alexis Pierce writing books, except she was writing inspirational self-help and people were struggling to find her books after a while, and I felt really terrible about that. So it can be very helpful to make sure there's nobody writing in your genre, or that there's not somebody with a massive name that's already writing books. If your name is Stephanie King, spelled very similar to the author Stephen King, it might be worth considering a pen name, because you want your name and your book title to be searchable. This is also a great time to design your book cover. If you haven't bought a pre-made cover from a pre-made cover group on Facebook, and you've decided, you know what, I'm gonna go at it on my own, I have $20 to commit to getting a cover, what I recommend doing is getting a membership to Envato Elements, which is a stock website where you can get stock images and graphics to use for your cover, and then logging into Canva. You don't need a Canva premium membership to do this, but keep in mind that a lot of Canva elements like graphics and photos do not have the licensing necessary to do a book cover. Much like with your title and your pen name, make sure that you are searching up books in your genre so that you match your cover to your subgenre and to your spice level. This one is super important because before my first year as a successful author, publishing as Alexis Pierce, publishing those 5 books that made me $50,000, I decided I was going to write contemporary romance books, and they were super spicy, except the covers I designed, which were based off of just other romance books that I saw without looking into my subgenre, my covers were based off of clean, non-spicy romance books. So when people went and read my books, they were mad because they were not expecting spice, because my covers did not indicate any sort of spice in the books. You also want to make sure that you're not using a cutesy cartoon rom-com cover for a dark romantasy book. If you want my cover template that I use so that you can get the fonts right and make it a little bit easier on yourself, make sure to check out Self-Publishing Success. Once your cover is designed, you then want to go and edit your book. Once you had a good enough brain break, you can now go edit your book. The way that I edit my book is I edit in a format that I did not write it in. So if I wrote on my FreeWrite keyboard, that's pretty easy because I can read it in Microsoft Word or in Vellum, which I use for my book formatting. Side note, you don't have to get an expensive software like Vellum to format. You can format your book in Microsoft Word and be just fine. Just use all of the header settings and stuff, and make sure you have like the copyright page and the dedication if you want one, and a title page. You can format it in Microsoft Word. That's totally fine. In fact, the first books that I ever published were all formatted in Microsoft Word for ebook and paperback, and nobody had a problem with it. I only use Vellum now because it's a lot easier to use, and I really like the design options that I can do with it. So what I do is I read through my book and I try to read it in 1 or 2 sittings to do my editing. Of course, since I dictate a lot of my work now while I'm driving because I'm on the road a lot, this does take me a bit longer. So instead of taking me like 1 or 2 days to fully edit my book, it takes me 4 or 5 days if I'm buckling down and doing like really hardcore heavy editing for hours every day. This is another good time to set your writing sprints and set those timers, by the way. It can also be really good to have something like Grammarly or Microsoft Word installed, but make sure you're not by default accepting all of the edits that they're giving you, because they're not all going to be a good idea. Make sure to use your brain and your discernment to decide whether those edits are good for your book. Once your book is ready for publication and you get it uploaded to Amazon and you set a pre-order, make sure that you watch this video so that you can finally start marketing and start making money.